Actually, it is earlier.
Oh, there is a story, and Harish ji is the culprit for that. वो हम बाद में discuss करेंगे. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So I just start. So good evening, everyone. Myself, Ruchi Agarwal, taking this opportunity to welcome you all and our speaker, Ms. Harini Srinivasan, to HR Milestone Forum. I'm happy to share that today is our 16th.
वीडियो ऑन करना पड़ेगा.
Can I request everyone to please mute your call?
Sorry, ये कैमरा से हटाओ.
नहीं ऑन ही है.
आपका
I welcome you all and our speaker, Ms. Harini Srinivasan, to HR Milestone Forum. I'm happy to share that today is our 16th annual Zoom meeting. HR Milestone was a forum started by HR professionals of Ahmedabad, keeping in mind the objective of returning to the profession. And we could really feel that today through initiatives like HR Kitli, Let's Say, Dil Say, and Wonderland of Corporate Jungle. Do join us. Do join our community on www.hrmilestone.com and on YouTube channels. We are present on all the social media. Ms. Harini, I take opportunity to introduce Ms. Harini Srinivasan. She's a certified behavioral analyst, transactional analysis, and design thinking practitioner. She's an agile organization builder with focus on shaping the future of work. A thoughtful human resource leader who believes that business can be turned by leveraging the power of its people. She mentors these schools interns as well. She is currently an affiliate partner of Semper Style Institute India, a human capital consulting for business transformation. I'm happy to tell you one more information that she will not be having any PPT presentation as she speaks powerful that requires no PPT presentation. So over to you, Ms. Srinivasan.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction, Ruchi. So, Wednesday evening, and it's amazing to get together with the fraternity. We never get this chance otherwise to meet everybody on a Wednesday evening. So I've been having a very interesting day today. So there have been back-to-back meetings, and for me it was literally ek haath mein belan or ek haath mein phone kind of juggling day. So, but it has been a very exciting day. So for me to unwind from such a chaotic day, the best way to unwind is to tell a story to all of you. So in my story, there are characters, and obviously for characters, for simplicity, and for us to be able to understand the story, there are going to be names. Now, if the story, the names, and any situation in the story seems familiar to you, the disclaimer is that it's purely coincidental and it's not intentional. It's not meant to hurt anybody's sentiments. Okay. So if there's anybody who's going to join the call a little later, we'll ensure that this disclaimer reaches them. Absolutely all characters in the story and the situations in the story are purely coincidental, even if you find a resemblance. So that, let's start. So there were three girls in my childhood when we were in class 5, and their names were Aarti, Bharti, and Kirti. Okay. So so there was a birthday party of one of the children in the class. So Aarti's gift was something that, it was one of those return gifts which she got from someone else. She packaged that because she was anyways not going to use it, and she came and gave that to the child. Bharti knew this girl a little better. So what Bharti did is she thought that an encyclopedia would be a great gift for her, because this girl, let's call her Jaya for convenience, she felt that Jaya is somebody who likes to read a lot of books. So she went ahead and bought an encyclopedia for her. What Kirti did was something very different. So Kirti went back and she tried to recollect all the conversations that she's been having with Jaya over the last few weeks as a run-up to her birthday. And she was trying to figure out what was in those conversations where Jaya felt that there is this thing that she's really looking forward to having as a gift on her birthday. Kirti recollected that Jaya said that she wants to become an artist and she wants to spend her weekends doing painting on canvases. And she didn't know where to get canvases from. So Kirti remembered this conversation and she decided that, that's the gift which is going to excite her the most. So she went ahead and bought canvas and some brushes and some acrylic paints for Jaya. Scene 2 is Jaya's birthday party. So all the kids come and we're all there and we give away our gifts to her. The cake is cut and all that happens. And then we sit there and we tell her that, come on, open the gifts now, right now in front of us, because each one of us is very curious to see what is the reaction that she gives when she's opening the gifts. So she opened a gift and it turned out to be a pencil box. We all exchanged glances. It looked like something very familiar. It was one of those return gifts which another friend had given. And it was a little bit of an embarrassment that Aarti had to face because that was her gift and it was a pass it on from someone else's return gift. Then other gifts were opened and another, it looked like a heavy gift. So Jaya was very curious. She opened it and she found an encyclopedia. Why she was very happy with it? Because she loves books. Okay? Everyone, all of us knew she loved books. And she was very happy with it. But she said, oh, this is an encyclopedia which I already had. It's a little bit in tatters, but it's a duplicate copy. Nevertheless, I will use it for replacing it. And then she went on opening other gifts as well. And finally, she opened a gift from which she saw a canvas and acrylic paints. And just imagine what was her joy when she saw that. And also imagine what was the reaction on Kirti's face when she saw that expression from her friend whom she loved so dearly, right? With this, I want to set in context what we are going to talk about in the next 40 minutes or so. At any point of time, if anyone has a question, wants to make a point, I think it will be a good idea to use the chat box if you want to ask any questions. And anybody in the organizing team can stop me and ask me to answer a question. Otherwise, if all of you can see at the bottom toolbar, there is something called as reactions. I'll be happy if you can put any reaction on your screen as and when I'm speaking, because I'm watching all your screens and that will make it a lot more interactive for me. In the reactions, I guess there are two reactions. One is a thumbs up and the other is a clap. Fortunately for me, there is no thumbs down. Anyways, so just go ahead and feel free to use those reactions as I speak, and that'll help me play to my gallery. I purposely don't come with a PowerPoint because I love to play to my gallery. So you're my audience and I'm going to play what you feel. Thanks. I saw some thumbs up coming. Right. So with this context of the story of Aarti, Bharti and Kirti of my childhood, this is where I'm setting the context for design thinking and design thinking in HR. So point number one is let me bust a very popular myth. I'm sure by now most of us are aware, but nevertheless, it's my duty to bust that myth before saying anything. Design thinking is not necessarily meant for products alone. Design thinking is for anything which is designed for a target audience. So it definitely is applicable to the services industry. So when we talk about HR as a function, HR is absolutely meant to be industry agnostic. There is no such thing as how does an HR in a manufacturing industry behave? How does an HR in a banking industry behave? How does an HR in a project management consulting industry behave? So on and so forth. And I can tell this to you with guarantee that it is a myth that HR needs to behave differently in different industries, because I myself have worked in 5 different industries. I started as a pharmacist and then moved on to ITES and then moved on to manufacturing and then to project management organization in oil and gas sector, and now into business process reengineering and consulting. So I've been through HR and also moved out of HR for a while because I felt that we are not supposed to be siloing ourselves. Now, why this is important is that when HR is not industry specific, when HR is absolutely industry agnostic, and we all know and firmly believe in it, why is it that we don't look at HR itself as one large services industry. Okay, all of us belong to one large services industry. We go beyond organizations, we go beyond boundaries. This particular forum itself is, there are no organizational charts that really bind us. There is no hierarchy here, and we are all here sharing information and sharing knowledge. So let's all commit ourselves that HR actually is in itself a services industry. Right? So going back to our characters, Aarti, Bharti, and Kirti. So they grow up, right? So when they grow up, incidentally, all of them become HR professionals. So they all grew up with me. I became a pharmacist. I wasted 5 years doing what I wasn't very happy doing. They joined the HR industry much before me, and they were ahead of me in the lead, in the race in HR. And what I noticed is that a lot of things from their childhood are actually come along with them. So when I came into the HR industry, there was obviously a chance where I got to interact with, I ran into Aarti, Bharti, and Kirti at different situations in forums like this. And we were generally exchanging notes on how life is treating us and what are we doing these days and all of that. And Aarti said, HR is boring. I mean, it's absolutely boring. All that I need to do is make policies, ensure that policies are implemented properly down to the last T, ensure that people are compliant with policies, and so on and so forth. Bharti said, well, I partly agree with you, but HR is not all that boring, because I kind of focus, I focus on what the management needs. And I try to drive that. So at least I have a good hold on the management, and I'm working with management. So there's a lot of synchronization. I know what the business needs. I'm a real HR business partner. So I don't fully agree with Aarti, but yeah, but I do agree it does get boring at times. And I looked at Kirti and she was bubbling. She looked a lot younger than her chronological age. Okay? I was wondering that what is this magic in her that keeps her so energetic and active even after spending almost 15, 16 years in her profession. And Kirti said, you know what? This is the most exciting profession I could have ever thought of, right? That's because I'm able to give to my people what they want, and in a much better manner than that they can think of. This is precisely what design thinking is all about. Okay? If you're able to service your customer, that is your employees, your people, your stakeholders, and stakeholders include management, your peer level, other departments in the organization, your employees in the organization. I would say even your office security guards who may be appointed through a third-party vendor. It may be even your housekeeping staff. Why not? Each of them becomes your stakeholder, because HR as a function is supposed to consciously practice empathy, which is the key and the first and foremost step in design thinking. And therefore, forget any other business, forget any other vertical, forget any other profession. I think the human capital profession is where design thinking is most apt and most relevant. So what was Kirti's magic? What is it that was making her a lot more excited about her role in HR, a lot more feeling that she's doing a great job? Is she had this empathy. The statement that she made is, I'm able to deliver to my people what they need in a way which is much better than what they expected. So absolutely she is focusing on getting her stuff absolutely people-centric, and she's evolving things around her people. And that's how design thinking really works. So in my conversation, as I was learning and finding ways, finding my way through HR, I was having these conversations with them. And I was asking them, okay, how do you work on policies then? Because each of you has a very different take on how policies are. So how do you apply your principles in policy making? So Aarti's answer was very simple. The moment management says that we need this policy, okay, for example, we needed a paternity leave policy. And management said, HR, come on, draft a paternity leave policy. And what I did is I shared this requirement on all the HR WhatsApp groups that I have. And I asked, does anybody have a paternity leave policy? Can you please share it with me? Sometimes I feel so lazy and I'm so bored with my job. Sometimes I say, If anybody has an editable version, a doc version, please share that with me. I know some of us do it at times, right? That's part of the story. Right? So this is what Aarti did, and what she got was and okay, there are people who generously share documents. So she got something which she directly tried to apply in her organization. And why was she absolutely frustrated with that methodology? Is she thought it will work in her organization because she picked up from a company which she thought is her industry, so everything should match absolutely. She just rolled it out, and she realized that she had to roll it back because people weren't very happy because they couldn't apply it to a lot of people. There were many people who had a lot of leave balance with them, so on and so forth. It became a big mess, and then she had to roll it back. And she said, this is what happens in HR, and I'm frustrated. I go ahead, I do benchmarking, I collect from the industry, and I share it with my company. It doesn't work. What are you saying? HR is great. So Bharti's style was slightly different. She also did this. She asked around, she asked in various WhatsApp groups, she searched on different groups on the internet. She found out different versions of the policy, and she put together something which she thought is relevant to her business. Okay, she rolled it out. It kind of went because it went from HR. There was support from management, but there were a lot of people who weren't very happy with it. They did come back. They said, but anyways, it doesn't make too much of sense. Now it's rolled out. There's kind of a 50-50 kind of a thing happening. What did Kirti do? You know what Kirti's policy was? Paternity leave policy. It was an eye-opener for me. What Kirti did was she figured out what is it that people want, right? So she did an exercise, what she would call as walk the talk. Okay, by the way, another disclaimer, some of these jargons that I'm using, they are my copyright. Okay, so if you happen to use them somewhere, please quote me. So she used a practice called as walk the talk. Okay, so what Kirti did is she used to go around meet with her people. She had assigned herself as an HR champion to 50 people, and she made it a point to ensure that she interacts with each of those 50 people one-on-one every week, once every week. Not too difficult. And none of these interactions were meant to be formal and calendarized. These interactions would be random, in any random order. So random that the person says that she's going to come and speak because she is HR, right? So she would go and she would meet all of these 50 people one-on-one once a week. And she would make notings in her little yellow notebook as to what these conversations were. And she would go back home, spend the evening, analyzing all those observations, all those things that people want. And she realized that this is an extremely powerful tool to feel the pulse of the population and to come up with a policy before it even becomes a grievance. So she said, let's do away with the grievance redressal cell of the yesteryears, of the industrial era. Here we are adults. We are people in the information era. We are people in the digital era. We're not going to have grievances. We're going to have solutions among ourselves. So why do we create a grievance cell, then invite people into it? Now, because you're invited, you will come with grievances. Why do all of that? So she said, fine, let me go around talking with people. Okay, now let me find out what is it that they want. But one commitment from me is I will give back to them what is it that they want, but in a much better way than they thought. Right? That was her mantra. So she spoke to a cross section of her people, and she realized that what people actually want is when the child goes to first day at school, you know, the father of the child wants to be there. And he ends up asking for leave, and he doesn't get leave approvals and so on. There are times when she has noticed that, you know, some of the employees used to say that my child has to undergo vaccination and he's crying a lot and my wife is not able to manage. I wish I were there. These are casual conversations. You know, what I sometimes call as agenda-less conversation. She actually just captured all these conversations, and from all of these conversations, all of these insights, she found out a beautiful way to come up with a paternity leave policy. And what was her policy? Her policy was like this. she came up with the first draft. Okay, obviously it's an iterative draft because she's applying design thinking there. It's an iterative draft. So the first draft said, we'll give 30 days of paternity leave. All right. So when other organizations are giving 15 days or 10 days or 7 days, whatever, we propose 30 days of paternity leave. The conditions are like this: the 30 days can be spread over 3 years since the child is born. Right? Now, who said paternity leave has to be taken as soon as the child is born and consumed then and there? Okay, that's what happens in the West for reasons in the Western context, right? So in the Western context, the support systems, the family support systems are not as much as strong as they are in India. So probably in the Western context, the father of the child is required to be in the hospital, come home, keep the home sanitized and ready enough to receive the baby, ensure that everything is put in place, ensure that there is, if you call it, business continuity at home, that food supplies and all of that. All that probably becomes the responsibility of the father, and probably that is why he requires a lot of time. But look at it in the Indian context. Most of the time there is family support. Either the mother or the mother-in-law is around to take care of the baby. And there are multiple aunts who keep giving a lot of advice. So there are lots of people around, and there's a lot of celebration that happens as soon as the child is born, and on day 11, the naming ceremony, so on and so forth. The father really doesn't get too much time to be with the child, too much of quality time, right? But think of it, every single vaccination, when all the family members go back to their routines and they're back and there's just one or two support system around, every single vaccination, the mother also wants the father to be along with her. The father also wishes that he's there, maybe to see how his child reacts to the needle. School interview, okay, both parents many a times are required to be there. First day at school, who says the father would not love to see his child's smiling face or crying face or face of anxiety on the first day of the school? First sports day, first annual day, whatsoever, till the child is 3 years or 4 years old. Why don't we use paternity leave, which is meant for the father to play his role, for every milestone in the child's life where the father's presence is required? Isn't that a great idea? So this is exactly what happens when you apply design thinking in policy making, for example, within HR. So Kirti gave back to her employees a beautiful paternity leave policy, which actually addresses their concerns, which she collected during her walk the talk, as to which are all the times that in a child's life cycle, the touch points where the father is expecting himself to be present, and he does not have to utilize any of his vacation days. So what the employees wanted, she gave it back to them in a way which is much better than what they thought. This is a classic example, and it's a real life example, believe me. Only the names are fictitious, but it's a real life example, and it works. Now, how did she apply design thinking here is, she went back on an iterative exercise. Now, she asked those empathy questions in her conversations with people during her walk the talk. She came up with the problem statement, defined the problem statement. She did something, I can see some questions coming up, we'll certainly take it up towards the end. So she did brainstorming with people using techniques like snowballing or affinity diagram. So these are very useful brainstorming sessions which can be done with a cross section of people from across the organization. Take your sample people, sample should be as diverse as possible. So get them from across levels, across hierarchy, across age groups, etc. Let them all collectively come into a room, and affinity diagram is one of the easiest and the best way to come up with the top 3 items which are collectively decided by the group. No idea gets trivial and gets thrown out. So she did all of this. She came up with a draft policy. Her draft policy was looking very different, where she said that, let the employee take 2 months, 60 days of paternity leave. Let us spread it over 5 years. Then the management people said that, oh, we can't have something lingering for 5 years. Finance had a problem. They said we can't have something cumulative for so long because this is a benefit and benefits get costed and there are incremental costs on it, so on and so forth. So with a lot of these iterations, then she went back to her empathy audience and she was trying to test with them that, would this make sense to you? She tried to see whether anybody has that aha moment in their eyes and she's giving this idea as a possibility. She did all of these iterations, and over a period of 2 weeks, the policy that came out was something that catered extremely well to the people, to her users, the end users. It made a lot of sense to the business in terms of not impacting business continuity because of absenteeism. That was a concern they had. I mean, why did the business not want to give paternity leave? Was they were a little worried about business getting impacted because the average age there was 32 for all the male employees. So they said that so many of our men are in the reproductive age. So if all of them start taking maternity leave turn by turn, what happens to our projects? So that was their concern. So with all these, she was able to address all their concerns, and through an iterative process of 7 versions of the policy draft, she released a policy which is sustainable and can maybe even outlive her in the organization. What did she derive out of this? An extreme sense of satisfaction because she did what she had committed of delivering something better than what they had even thought. What did the employees perceive this as? Each one in her organization was like that Jaya in that birthday party. They felt that Kirti is somebody who, whatever she does it for me. So each one of them had this feeling that she is so fond of her people that whatever she does it for the people's sake. Everyone in the management felt that she's somebody who understands business so well. And whatever she does with a very strong sense of business in her mind. So this is what design thinking does to HR. It simply builds credibility for the HR function, both in the eyes of the management and in the eyes of the employees and in the eyes of every single stakeholder. What did the housekeeping boys in Kirti's organization feel about this? So news like this, when there is so much excitement, when there is so much of thrill around the place, it spreads. It's absolutely infectious and contagious. It spreads even faster than the coronavirus. The housekeeping boys, the janitors, they also realized that this is an organization where people are cared for. And they went back and told their employer that no matter what happens, we should be continued to deployed in this organization because we feel that this is a place where people are cared for. At some point, Kirti quit that organization. And even after a year, right from the housekeeping staff to the janitors to the CEO, there are several employees who reach out to her and they tell her that how much she's being missed. Wouldn't that be a great feeling for all of us as HR professionals to be remembered for all the good things even after we are gone? Right? So let me take another example of design thinking in HR. Let's take a controversial subject called as performance management. So how does one make performance management absolutely exciting? So performance management is something which all of us have been growing up saying that, yeah, there are objectives and everybody's achievement has to be measured against those objectives. And you give everyone a label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there is somebody who's sitting there and decides what should be the increment for 1, for 2, 3, 4. In some organizations, it is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In some organizations, 1, 2, 3, 2, 5. And for me, whichever organization I go, it's always the reverse. So I struggle to understand that, first of all. So this is how performance management is. And there is this popular story that, you shuffle what HR does is shuffles all the names in a jar and throws it. And whichever name gets stuck on the ceiling exceeds expectations. Whichever name gets fallen on the table meets expectations, and whichever chit gets fallen on the floor gets tagged as does not meet expectations. So this is a popular perception about performance management. So how did this happen in the first place? When performance management, the traditional performance management systems were defined, I'm talking of management by objectives, it was defined keeping in mind the stakeholders, which were the business heads. So when it was designed at that time and age, it made sense, but everything has a shelf life. So probably that needs to be relooked now, and who are our end users? What is it that people want? Now, we are moving to multi-generation workforce, and nothing can stop us from getting there. We're going to be having 4 generations working under the same roof. So obviously, one size fits all is not the answer. So design thinking has a big place to play. So what can one do about design thinking here in performance management is have those empathy questions. Ask all those questions as how may we make performance appraisal process a lot more exciting for you? Hear it from your end users. I've done that, and people have come back telling me, I want my manager to tell me how I have performed, project by project. I want my manager to have done a lot of homework and come back and give me feedback. I have people who came back telling me that performance appraisal discussions for me will become exciting when I have my manager and I have my project manager also on a call or in the same room. Because I don't think that my line manager knows everything that happened on the project. It's all those small, tiny stories which happened on the project. So I want both of them there. I have people who came back telling me that I would like to have a dialogue and not a monologue. I want to go back and tell my manager, what is it that I thought that we could have done better to make me perform better? So when we ran an innovation lab at our workplace, and in the innovation lab is where all these ideas used to come. And what was the constituent of this innovation lab? Who are the people who are part of it? The innovation lab had people who are across hierarchy, across functions, and we used to open the lab once a week, and then we used to tell people the innovation lab would be functional between 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and people would just come there once a week, do it every week, do it every month, whatever frequency is doable, depends on how the business is running, progressing. So in the innovation lab, all these ideas came up from people, and they said, why don't we design a performance appraisal process, which is a dialogue, okay? There should be no real structured format, no real rating, but a dialogue, a conversation between people. That was a great idea. Everybody seemed to have consensus in that meeting. And then there was this next challenge which came up saying, okay, if we have to make a dialogue, how do you maintain consistency between managers? There will be some managers like me who will love to talk. I need a mic, I need audience, and I can go on, right? So there will be some managers who love to talk a lot. There could be some managers who don't want to talk at all. How do you bring in consistency? So then, with another bit of brainstorming, the whole group came with an idea that let's come up with a conversational a framework. We'll give people some help, some nudges. So then they said, no, then if you're going to script the conversation, then the entire essence of it is going to go. So how do you think they're going to make it enjoyable? Then we said, okay, let's make it a facilitated conversation. Some of us, a bunch of us, whoever is managing talent here, we will train ourselves on how we are going to do these conversations. We will lead those conversations. We will prompt managers. We will prompt the appraisee. We'll ensure that the conversation is engaging. And over time, we'll get better. So finally, that group felt it works, and we settled on it. And it was amazing. At that end of that performance appraisal season, anyone who got a low rating also came out feeling happy. Believe me, I did this in a manufacturing industry where things are very traditional, very hierarchical. And till date, this performance appraisal system is still alive and active. Although they have moved into a system where they're doing it online now, nevertheless, they still have those conversations because they feel that by applying design thinking, everyone's idea was taken into it. It was extremely iterative. So there was a buy-in right from top management right down to the junior most stakeholder in it. Even family members had a piece to say when we designed this. So it was so iterative that it has outlived me in the organization. I left this organization in 2014. We are now in 2020, and this methodology still works there. And I keep hearing from them that this is amazing. So this is what design thinking does. Design thinking, to me, builds credibility for HR in the organization. It builds credibility for the HR professional personally. It has done that for me. And last but not the least, it outlives every HR individual. Why not we leave an organization saying this is XYZ's process and let that outlive you in that organization, or maybe even outlive, let me say, me in this world. So I really want to be remembered after I'm gone. So why don't I do things where people remember me really, really for the good things after I'm gone? And that's where design thinking comes. I saw a lot of questions coming up, and we have 20 minutes more. So I would like to take some of the questions and deliberate, because I have one commitment I make is every single question deserves an answer. So I'll try and answer almost all the questions right here for the benefit of everyone. In case we run out of time, or in case Haresh or anybody asks me to shut up, I'll take those questions. I'll have those questions sent to me, and I'll definitely answer. But I think we should go to the questions. So how would we want to do it? Shall I call out a name, and that person can unmute himself or herself and ask the question? I think that would be good. Let me go to the first question. There are a lot of good evenings. Somebody called KM says good, simple, insightful. Thank you very much. Gauri, brilliantly put. Thank you very much. Amazing example. Thank you very much.
That will take too much of your time. I think someone from the team can go through the questions and ask you, and you can answer them.
I'm okay.
That will be easier
Anyway,
for you.
I just spotted one question which says, what will happen if the employee quits after 3 months or so? I think this is on the paternity leave policy, right? Yeah. So who is this MS? You can unmute yourself. Yeah. Okay. So this is on the paternity leave policy, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. Hi.
Yeah. Okay. So the example was very specific to that organization. In that organization, attrition rate is not very high. So it was very easy for them. So they discussed all that, and they came up with the 3-year timeline. I know of another organization which thought it makes sense to do it even for 5 years. It's an organization's call. Obviously, since it is a benefit, it is a paid benefit. There were controls put in place. If a person quits, then he forfeits some monetary value of that benefit, so on and so forth. So there can be controls.
It's an excellent idea. Even I just thought of implementing it, but my only concern is if you are spreading over the leaves for 2 years or 3 years, what will happen if the employee quits the organization? Maybe it could be due to an unavoidable situation. If that is the case, whether that could be reimbursed or
yeah. You can put in some kind of control. You can put in some kind of cost for damage. And that can be recovered. That's absolutely fine. But all that. But the most important thing is you have to be absolutely transparent about this methodology when you are rolling out the policy. Withdrawal from a scheme has to be very, very crystal clear when you're rolling it out itself. You cannot do it. You cannot say that we'll cross the bridge when it comes, because the moment you do that, all the credibility you gained in the first place will go for a toss.
Right.
So any policy which talks about, which has a monetary value, whether it is real or notional attached to it, if there is a withdrawal from that policy by the employer or by the employee, there needs to be that methodology which has to be clarified right in the front. And I'm sure that organization did that. So
okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Harini,
Yeah.
Purnima here.
Yes,
thank you. That was a great session. I loved the storytelling. So you mentioned about the performance appraisal where even the family members were involved. I mean, to some extent.
Yes,
so what was that actually?
Yeah. Okay. So that was done with a bit of a purpose. Why we involved family members there was that morale was extremely low in that organization for a reason. There was a new manufacturing facility coming up in the far-flung outskirts away from Mumbai, Thane, and the plant was at Thane. The original plant was at Thane, and we were in the situation of shifting everybody and shutting down this plant and converting this into a corporate office. So this involved, it brought up a lot of unhappiness among the blue-collared workers. The operations team, the team that was actually handling manufacturing, not just the blue-collared, but the engineers who were running the factory, were extremely upset about the distance they'll have to travel and all of that. If we had just, one advice which came to us from global corporate was just put up a notice, shut down the factory after 2 days if no one, if you've given them enough of chance to look at it, and then just shift everything over there. Okay. That would have been like Aarti's story, right? It doesn't make sense to me to continue the practice here. It doesn't make sense to me to have that pencil box which someone else gave me. Might as well give it away to Jaya, right? That was how it was. But we didn't want to do that, right? We really wanted to be Kirti's story. So we went back trying to find out from them what is it that's really upsetting them and all of that. And they had lots of stories to tell where wives were involved and why they were unhappy about the time taken to travel and how it will impact dropping the child to school and so on and so forth. So we had to communicate to them that we are an organization that cares, right? So we will eventually come up with ways in which you can manage home and all of that. So when we worked on their performance targets for the quarter, we actually put in place. We factored in how much time they would require to take care of home, what are the timings that they would require to be at home, and how do we arrange the bus services around that, so on and so forth. So we went back to their family members saying, how is it that you are going to contribute for the success of your husband? Okay, so that is where they were involved in setting the targets. So and at the end of it, we went back to them saying, you evaluate whether they have been able to do justice at home. Of course, no increments was based on that output. But what happened is the productivity of each of these engineers, when they were on the shop floor, when they were supervising the production on the line, it was amazing because they didn't have to worry about what is happening at home. They knew that their wives were taken care of. They're not going to complain when they go back home. So that was the effect it had. No one, when we did it, we didn't really think that this is going to work like this, but it was magical. It was simply magical. So when we went back and asked them how was their quality time at home, and how did the wife's contribution help in this individual's doing very well, they were able to talk stories. And we decided to give away our employee of the year, etc. awards, which we used to do it randomly at any time through anyone's hands. We said we will do it in the annual day where we invite family members as well. Because shifting the factory from one place to another was a big thing, and it would not have been successful without a single day's loss of production if the family had not cooperated. We wanted to give that message loud and strong about the performance to the family. So that's how it was. Obviously, they were not involved in setting all the targets, but for this instance, yes. But it happened because we reached out to them when we formed our policy, when we formed our relocation policy, when we formed our performance appraisal policy, and so on. So that was where it was. I saw another question from Gauri.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So Gauri's question is, would you like to ask the question?
Yes, so it is very interesting, and it would be very nice to know how it was really executed. So was it that the talent partner was present in the room when the dialogue was going on, how it was perceived, and did it have any impact on the real rating, or rating remained the same but the satisfaction increased in terms of the dialogue?
Brilliant question. I am very glad that you asked this question, Gauri,
Thank you.
because there are lots of nuances in this. In fact, you brought in many aspects, which I'm happy that you voiced this question, because I wouldn't have read all of this in your what you've typed over there. The straight answer is yes, the HR business partner was present during the discussion, because that was what the group had agreed. The group had agreed that we will do it facilitated. They said that a script won't work because this is something very, very new, and we want consistency so that everyone is treated fairly. We don't want some managers talking too much. We don't want introverted managers not saying anything in the conversation. Even if it's scripted, it may not happen. We needed someone to monitor whether justice is being done to the appraisee in the discussion, and also whether the appraisee is ensuring that he gets what he wanted. Because this came from them, right? The whole idea came from them. So if the HR business partner is sitting there as an observer, looking with a non-judgmental eye to both the parties, it works amazing. So the appraisee did not have any problem with the HR business partner sitting there. The manager did not have any problem with the HR business partner sitting there, because the HR was not making any judgmental comments, was not making any judgmental articulation, or even asking any questions. HR role was only to ensure that the conversation goes without bias, just to play the role of a bias interrupter. Because sometimes these conversations get a little sticky. It can get a little fiery. So there was somebody to douse the fire. There was someone to bring in some life into it. Not ensure that both the parties have an adult-to-adult conversation, not a parent-child, because it's very odd. Automatically the manager takes the parent ego state at most times, saying that if I were you, I would have done this, right? And immediately the appraisee goes into a defensive state and says, I didn't have any support from you. What do you expect me to have done? And that conversation is absolutely non-productive. And the outcome of that would have been a typical does not meet expectations kind of a sticker label on the head. outcome of this was there was a dialogue. HR's role was to ensure that both of them are made conscious. And obviously, it was not very difficult because some of these people were part of that innovation lab. Right? So it was not a total surprise to them as to why we are sitting there. So it was
The ownership was already there.
Yes, yes. And every manager felt accountable both for the success and the failure. Most importantly, failure. Like I keep saying to my team that failure is mine and success is yours. Right? So everyone started getting that feeling. And once it became normal, then it's a conversation. And then HR can slowly withdraw. But it always makes sense because, you know, if you are a behavioral scientist, you don't even need to have a certification. But if you're a human resource professional, it's very important that you understand psychology because every day of your life you're dealing with people, right? So if you want to understand psychology, if you want to become a practitioner, it makes sense to observe. So you can always say that, you know, our role is to observe. We're not going to step on your shoes. We're not going to play your role. We're not going to even influence you. But let me just sit as an observer. It'll help. And it works.
Okay. And did it have any impact on the rating?
Rating,
or-
yeah, that's a good point that you brought in, which is not written here. Yes, so the rating is something which we said in this situation. Do not communicate any rating in that appraisal discussion.
Okay.
The appraisal discussion will not use words like you have exceeded expectations or you have not exceeded or you have not met expectations. The appraisal discussion will be purely around what we call as a STAR framework. No, STAR framework is not my original, it is there, you can Google. It is S stands for the situation.
Yeah.
So the appraiser is supposed to pick up a situation and both of them are supposed to talk around it. The appraiser is supposed to talk about the tasks around that situation, what action he or she felt that the appraisee took, and what was the result or the outcome. So that is the STAR. And the entire conversation happens around the STAR framework. No rating, no decision is given in that discussion. And we ended that discussion saying that, hope you had a great conversation. Hope you got the feedback that you wished you would have got. Hope your concerns are addressed on your way forward in the next year, right? Because that was a very critical question to sign off because you're drawing that connecting bridge. Like in a relay race, you don't throw the baton, right? You hand it over. So you have to hold it, you know, for a few microseconds so that the baton doesn't drop. And you're leading this person into the next year. So we ended this conversation with this. And then we said that this is how it is between you and me, but we are a large organization. So we have to look at how everyone's work has impacted the overall business. So there will be some ratings that will happen towards the end of this entire exercise, eliminating certain biases and all of that. We will also look at how we benchmark you vis-a-vis the data that we have from the market. And based on that, some incremental percentage will be communicated to you later. So we kept it very, very, very as though it's a process. There is a lot of backup, and we committed to them that if you have any questions around why you were rated so much or why you were given this increase, we will show you transparent data as to what transpired here. So with that commitment, when you sign off, they go back with a lot of feel good. They feel they're part of this entire exercise. They don't feel like you know, they are caged animals in the zoo. So that's what it did.
Thank you so much. It was really useful.
Thanks.
Harini, you took some great examples. This is Harmeet. My question to you is this constraint getting shifted in some way? So while probably the part of the discussion that happens around appraisal, the employee is not really concerned about the outcome in terms of ratings, but somewhere after having a feel-good factor, sooner or later the employee gets to know about the rating. So while probably we have used that opportunity not to really unsettle the employee, but somewhere along we come back to the rating mechanism again. So I love your concept of design thinking. Is there a way by which some good organizations, the way they have done it, completely away with the rating? Can we use both design thinking and doing away completely with the rating as a means to manage the performance? That's a question.
Absolutely. We did that precisely because rating was something, you know, when we did these empathy conversations, one of the things people were extremely upset is, yaar, mere upar label chipka diya. 3 saal, if it is meets expectation, chauthe saal mein kuch nahi milega. It literally came to that, saying this is a label, okay, that I have met expectations. Met expectations means average. Because people go with the, you know, sometimes words are a little confusing, no? Meets expectations is in the middle of the 5-point scale. So people assume that it is average, right? So even if I try to convince them very hard that meets expectation means you have met your expectations, it is not average, you are actually fitting the role. Still the feeling is wo scale ke beech mein hai, so it is average, I will not get anything. And it is next to impossible to satisfy somebody saying that it's all good. I tried that and I failed, it didn't work. Then I realized that why put labels at all? Okay, are they apples in the supermarket where I'm sticking a barcode on everyone? No, I mean they're humans, right? So let's not get into sticking labels to anybody. So we did away with the rating in the sense, no rating is communicated to any employee. We are not saying anywhere in the letter that you are meeting expectations or you are exceeding or what. We are not saying that. Our communication to every employee simply says that your performance was evaluated based on your discussion that happened around, using the star framework, taking feedback from all your stakeholders whom you had wanted us to talk to, and your salary increase is based on your tenure in the organization, your performance, your potential, as well as your position in the market, right? So nobody saw anything about why am I this rating, why is that person that rating. Of course, questions came. Nothing is a secret. We all know information gets shared. So people did come asking, I got 10%. Why did someone else get 14%? Those questions did come. Okay. But we had committed in the beginning saying, whatever is the decision taken for you individually, we will show it to you, the entire background working. So when we did the background working, we had done a position to position benchmarking with the market. Okay. And we had put in the min, max, median against each individual's name for that particular role. So for example, if it was a senior engineer from the production department, so we said senior engineer production department with the 10 companies, comparator companies, we showed them these are the 10 companies, senior engineer definition is this, so it's exactly mapping with your role. This is the min, max, median. With your kind of experience, you are already at the 75th percentile, but you're a great performer, so we didn't want you to dip from there, so we're retaining your 75th percentile, the 10% retains towards the 75th percentile. And this is a scientific working. So there was no grievance as to why this increase and why that. Of course, we had removed the label of rating. We had done a ranking in the background only for us to do certain analytics. Like if somebody is consistently rated very high, suppose somebody is consistently rated exceeds expectations, is there any such person with a consistent rating who is below the median? Then we should not skip correcting that person. So we use the ranking only for us to do these analytics and come up with these decisions on salary. But we did not give it to them, and it's not required. Rankings is useful. Using the bell curve as a leading indicator is incorrect. Using it as a lagging indicator is probably better. That is, do not use a screwdriver to nail, poke a nail in the wall. You'll end up damaging your finger. So don't use a bell curve to fit somebody and label someone, but definitely use it to identify who are your top talent and bottom talent, because you need to treat them differently. That's all. So ranking was done, but not communicated. And communication was kept as much transparent as possible, at least for that individual. So no harm telling a person why we did something for you. You don't have to share other person's data, but this. And as long as the source is known, very little questions are asked.
Thanks, Harini.
You're welcome.
Ms. Hirani, hello,
Yes.
Rahul this side.
Yes, Rahul.
Hi. So I posted one question and I listened to you carefully, and we are talking lots of monetary things. Let's talk on developmental aspect a bit, right?
Yes.
Whenever it comes to the performance appraisal season, we are tagged as in the guys who will be increasing our money. Simply in a typical manufacturing setup wherein we failed somewhere, we as an HR, we failed to understand that pyramidal structure shown by Maslow. What motivates the person, right? And if you have a manpower exceeding 3,000 or 4,000, it is practically impossible to talk to everyone.
Yes, yes.
Or to monitor their managerial conversations one-to-one whenever they are doing, let it be in shifts or whatever it is. Second reality is that every time they are talking is like I heard you and we said that we are not discussing the ratings, but over there only ratings are discussed in a typical dialogue of performance appraisal system.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
right.
I have and even talking to HR also, it is not an untouched place wherein a person he talks about ratings, and by the end of the day, coming out of the place, we come and like, okay, we are performing, we are exceeding, we are improving, whatever it is. there is very less dialogue about that. This is your skill, this is your performance. To enhance up to this level, you require so and so training. You need to know so and so subjects. You need to acquire so and so skills.
Yes.
This is somewhere lagging behind. It's not a part of a bell curve because it's not a monetary aspect.
Correct. Let me address this question in a way which is matching with the context, the topic of today's session. Performance management compensation is a subject very, very close to my heart. So I will get into solving your problem. Let me not do that, because let's talk about how you bring in design thinking here. Okay, let's not deviate from that. That's very tempting to deviate. So when you apply design thinking here, typically what you're saying is absolutely true. That's what happens. It ends up entering into a discussion around rating, salary increase, and so on. Now, why does that happen? Is simply because we're all behaving like either like Aarti in an extreme or like Bharti. Okay, we are not trying to find out from your appraisee and the appraiser and the other stakeholders. We're not trying to find out what is it that you want to be an outcome of this discussion. Do you want the outcome of this discussion to label people so that you put a formula? If you're rating 1, then you will get 20%. If you're rating 5, you will get 0%. Is that the outcome? If that is the outcome, please go ahead and put labels. That's what design thinking is saying. But if your outcome is to identify people who are your top performers, okay? If your desired outcome is to identify them, understand what is running in their minds, try to gauge their pulse. Is there a possibility that this person will leave as soon as he gets an increment? Okay, if these are all things which you want to find out in an appraisal discussion, the whole conversation will be different. So what you do is, as an HR professional, when you are designing this conversation framework, okay, you go back to your, like what we did in the innovation lab, and try to find out what is the outcome that we want out of this conversation. If the outcome, the script of that conversation is not leading anywhere towards labeling and salary increase, it's only going to say, in our script, the manager was asked, okay, now, like we asked in Kaun Banega Crorepati, Amitabh asked, what will you do with this 1 crore if you win? So we also did that. We did that question. We said, okay, let's play KBC. Okay, you're on the hot seat. What will you do if we give you a 20% increase and a promotion? So if this guy says, fantastic, I will go ahead and do this for the organization. These are my plans, and this is, engage him into a conversation to see, does he have ideas? Does he have the potential to take on the next role? If he does, I tell you, give him that promotion and give him that 24% increase. If he says, well, I don't know, let me see, you can make a judgment that this guy is likely to jump off. So use your instincts, use some creativity, bring in life into that conversation. Otherwise, life of HR is very boring, like Aarti's life. Let us speak.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so that's where design thinking comes. You put yourself in the shoes of the appraisee, in the shoes of the manager simultaneously, and try to understand what they want to derive out of that, and keep it iterative so that you come bang on to what you want.
But then one more thing, just one more thing.
Yes.
It cannot be an overnight study. I would say it will take a bit of time. Way before appraisals.
Absolutely. ऐसा क्यों होता है कि appraisal season में HR बहुत active होता है? It should not be so, right? HR is supposed to be busy throughout the year. So as soon as one appraisal is over, go back, circle around with the same people, have your second round of empathy conversations, trying to find out what went good, what went bad, and try to do something better next year.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yes. Sheena. Hi, Sheena. Question. You have a question. Would you like to voice it?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Sheena.
Yes, ma'am. I have a question.
Yes.
There are some biases in the performance management. So, how this situation is dealt by the HR?
Okay. So, the answer to this typically is that HR has to play the role in countering the bias by keeping data always ready. Data is very, very important. Okay, so biases typically will come. You're talking about liking and disliking, I guess, I presume. So if HR has a lot of data around this particular individual, you can always counter the bias that the manager might have. Now putting this,
but sometimes there is like mid-level management. So there may be a situation like employees handling the situation with that mid-level management also, like if I'll say something, so it will impact my appraisal for the next year as well.
Yeah. So that's what. So first of all, like Rahul said, it's not an overnight change. Okay, if credibility of HR is built in, when trust is developed, people will not worry about what will happen, how it will impact the next year's appraisal. They know that HR is listening, HR is their champion, and HR will handle. But this answer, Sheena, I can talk to you one-on-one a little later, because this is slightly digressing from design thinking. I see there are more questions around design thinking, so I would like to take that here. But Sheena, I can always, yeah, so you know me, we can always connect one-on-one.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah? Okay. Yes. Dhara, you have a question. Do you want to voice it?
Yes,
I
actually,
think Dhara's question and Anita's question, I think, is the same, slightly, sequential. So Dhara can ask the question, and Anita can also follow it up.
yes, my concern is about onboarding the employees. So, as we already know that if the start is good, then the end will be, end should not be there, but the start should be so clear and transparent. So
Yeah.
that's where, and in my office, there is a lot of mobility going on, and we are recruiting in batch, and we are growing day by day. So we need to do onboarding of 10 people a day. So in that, anyway, design thinking can help us.
Yes, absolutely. So design thinking obviously helps everywhere, in every employee touch point in the employee life cycle. Okay, so definitely onboarding being the first touch point when the person joins the organization, it plays a role. So I'll give you an example of what we tried in one of my organizations. So when we applied design thinking there in our empathy conversations, we used to do our empathy conversations with people who have finished with their onboarding process, because we felt that it was becoming very dull, boring, and we needed to change it. So what we realized that this was a project management organization which had a global presence, and people were onboarded and immediately deployed on projects. So they were getting no time to sink in and assimilate into the organization's culture. They were asked to sign a document which says that I have read and understood the ethics and compliance and all of that, but it made no sense. So that was one feedback we got. And when we asked them, what do you want us to do differently? They said that we want the onboarding process should be so interactive that we get to meet people, understand what's happening in the home offices and so on. So we did a lot of iterations. We started with having one-on-one Skype call discussions with people on the home office. We tried to buy in, squeeze in time here and there, make some extended hours in the first week and all of that. But again, that wasn't really satisfying all new joinees. And then we brought in an aspect of, can we use a little bit of virtual reality? So we did an experiment with a bunch of interns from one of the colleges that I go to, and we brought in virtual reality, and we said that, okay, as part of the induction, you take a virtual tour of whichever home office that you're going to be working with for your project before you get on board. When you meet people, you get to meet them face to face. So the idea of bringing in virtual reality into onboarding came from design thinking. So it depends on what is the pain point in your onboarding process. What is it that people are not happy with? What is it that they would wish to see? Based on that, you design your onboarding. What works for me may not work for you. So it's very, very specific to your context. And in design thinking, it's extremely important to contextualize your design, to contextualize your it's almost like a product or a service. So like I said, you can't use a screwdriver to hammer a nail into the wall, right? So don't copy anything, contextualize it. That's the whole concept.
Yeah.
Anita, do you
Thank
want
you,
to...
Harni.
And Anita,
just a request, if you can send any reference book or any course or something is available on internet that we can study design thinking.
Yeah, I'll connect with
more,
you one-on-one. You can always reach out to me through LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you.
That's the easiest, and then we can stay in touch. And that applies to anybody. Anyone who wants to ask any very specific question one-on-one, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My contact details are also there, so anything is fine. With permission from Harishji and the team, I'm okay. Anita, do you want to voice your question? Is Anita there?
Yes, Harini.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I got the clarity. So almost what Dhara has asked, the same kind of.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I think MS's question, I think that I have answered. Why percentage varies among co-workers? MS, I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, all right. Okay. MS, by the way, may I know your name?
Mekla.
Mekla, okay. Okay. I just want to put some human back into this conversation. Okay. All right. Okay. Is there anything else? Any closing comments? Any ideas anyone wishes to share? This is your forum. Please feel free to speak.
Hi Harini, Shreya this side.
Hi Shreya.
Yeah, it was really a very amazing session, and definitely so many inputs and takeaways from you. So I have the HR background, and now I'm working as an HR consultant, mostly for the manufacturing industry and the startups. So what problem I'm facing is that while I want to implement the design thinking into the industries, many of the times the entrepreneurs themselves are not ready for this. They don't want to adopt this practice, and they believe that if they are, it is more about the employee-driven company rather than the employer-driven company. So what would you like to suggest? Because ultimately it is the employees who are the asset of the organization. And the owners think that if you are doing everything what the employees are asking us to do, then there is no meaning of the management.
Absolutely, absolutely. See, one very simple rule for all of us in HR is we need to be able to balance the head and the heart. Okay, so we cannot afford to take any decision which is absolutely business oriented, that is only thinking through the head as to how this is going to impact the business, and your decisions cannot be completely biased towards that. Your decisions cannot be completely biased towards employees as well. That's completely working with the heart. Both will cause you damage to your own role in the organization. So I would never recommend that. When you're balancing your head and the heart, you will obviously come up with a way to balance between your management and your people, so that you come up with a decision which is making sense to all. Another simple rule is the moment HR goes and tells management that I wish to use this technique, let's say design thinking, it is a jargon word for most people, and they'll say it won't work. Okay, and even if you say that it worked in IDEO, it worked here, it worked there, they say those are different organizations. It won't work in our industry. So what I suggest is you don't have to go ahead and tell anybody that you're going to use this technique or this tool. Okay. It's just that you have to start practicing. Start with empathy. That is the key. Start with empathy. The moment you start practicing empathy, and okay, the only word of caution here is empathy should not be only with the employees. Then you're working only with your heart. Okay. Yeah. Put yourself in the shoes of all your stakeholders around you. Stakeholders around HR is everybody. Your employees, your peer level, your other departments, finance, whom we generally hate, managers, top management, everybody. Your empathy conversation should be with all of them. Then collectively what you assimilate will be what everybody wants together. So when you do any process change, do the empathy conversations with a cross section of the organization. Get these cross section representatives into a room to discuss possibilities. Get a collective consent of everybody, and then release a draft which this group will verify. Without anybody's knowing, you would have deployed design thinking. And you would, believe me, you wouldn't even have spent a rupee in all of this. It's just your salary which takes care, and you would have applied design thinking. It's as simple as that. And you have a buy-in from everyone. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Try it and it'll work.
Last
Yeah, definitely I'm going to try.
Yeah.
Last
question. And if you don't lose anything, so it's okay.
I would like to talk to you more on this. So I already have sent you the LinkedIn connection request.
Okay, sure.
Right, we'll talk in detail later on. Thank you.
So can I ask the last question?
You're saying it's the last question? Okay, I like that. You've decided.
No, actually, Harish sir already told that it will be a last question.
Okay.
So your permission is there.
One more question will take.
Thank you. So Harini, it is indeed a wonderful session you had. What I understood out of your entire interaction is there is a kind of progress we made as HR professional from traditional practices to transactional to traditional to now HR business partner role. So what are those few things which we either start or continue or stop doing as HR professionals in our current context of work?
Okay. What all of us have to stop doing is stop policing, stop playing cop. Okay. HR is not meant to be the police function. HR is not meant to say that you do this, you're good. You don't do this, you're non-compliant, you're going to be jailed. So stop policing. What you continue doing is collecting data and converting it to useful information. Continue doing that. And what you should start doing is start practicing psychology. You don't need a degree because you're not going to do any therapy for anyone. But practicing psychology in the sense observing people as people, observing their reactions on small things, observing how their emotions change when you're delivering something. You start doing all of that, and then you will become an absolutely you'll move towards becoming a more effective HR professional, and that's actually the crux of design thinking. So stop being a cop, continue collecting data and converting into useful information for decision making, unbiased decision making, and start practicing observational psychology and be happy.
Last question we'll take from Annapurna and then we'll go to Ruchi.
All right.
Annapurna? No, I think she has. Okay, Ruchi.
Annapurna did she hear you?
I think she's left.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Ruchi.
Thank you, Hani. It was really an amazing session, and you really burst the myth that design thinking is only for a product. HR actually is a service industry, and the key is empathy, connection. This is what we learned, and it is really an eye-opener for all of us HR sitting out here, that we should walk the talk, connect with people, and keep empathy. Thank you very much for the session.
Thank you very much.
And
team and
tomorrow we have
oh wow. This is an amazing session tomorrow. Fantastic.
Yes, so tomorrow we'll be having Brigadier.
Yes.
We'll be talking about the transition in the RB way.
Thank you. And thanks a lot, HR Milestone team.
So
and you'd asked me what I would like to give back to the fraternity. I would like to give back to the fraternity a single commitment that, for whatever I am worth, if anybody wants to bounce an idea with me, wants to have a quick chat on how things will work, I am open to it. I have 21 wakeful hours in a day, so feel free to nudge me, shake me anytime. And my commitment is you will get a response within seconds. I think Hareshji has seen an example of it. I respond very quickly. So that's what I want to give back to the fraternity.
Thank you. So thank you, and thanks to all the members who have joined today. Let's see you tomorrow again. Thank you all.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye. Stay safe.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.